Somehow, Palpatine returned. Um, ay, ay, ay. Hi, friends. It's Sarah, the Fat Culture Critic. So I'm not American. I'm Canadian, um, which means that in Canada we are very much affected by U.S. Um, politics, although we are not participating in it. I would rather we were less affected. I don't really want to participate in it. Um, but I do. I have a number of friends in America, queer friends in America mostly. Um, and so my heart goes out to you. I was trying to be a bit of a support person for them yesterday, wherever I can. And yeah. But I think we need to have a conversation a wider conversation, not just US specific, but a wider conversation about the way politics are right now. Because this wasn't the only election that I was worried about this month, or over the last month. Um, in British Columbia, here, we had an election early in the month, which a lot of the tactics played out quite similarly. We were lucky, and the Conservatives lost by one seat, and these were not the sort of old-fashioned Queen in business Conservatives that we used to have in Canada when I was growing up. These are Trumpists, quite explicitly, convoy people, and yeah, there's um yeah, certain kind of conservatives have been very emboldened by patterns in America. And the tactics that in this case the NDP, who are, and provincially they're the sort of middle of the road party. The federal NDP are actually supposed to be left wing. um, uh, but yeah, that's a bit of kind of the complicated things of Canadian politics. Parties shift and change, and the NDP were using very similar tactics to what I saw in the Democrats using, because it's a one seat isn't a victory. It's a snatching from the jaws of defeat moment, skin of our teeth, and still need to learn something from it moment. And then as well, the province of my hometown where I grew up, Saskatchewan, had an election as well, and they're the Conservatives won, as they have for a while. They call themselves the Sask Party, which a little bit of Canadian history, a little bit of Saskatchewan history, they have to call themselves the Saskatchewan Party because in the 90s, nobody in the entire province would have been willing to vote for Conservatives because the Conservative Party, under Grant Devine, were convicted of a bunch of crimes. And at the time, that mattered. Oh, if it matters now. Uh, uh, New Brunswick also had an election and managed to pull off a bit of an actual victory. And we are also about a year or so from now due to have a federal Canadian election. And Pierre Poilievre is is a JD Vance. I don't know what his relation to Couches is, but he's very sort of wheedly little creepy little conservative man who worships Trump. And I worry that if we lose, not even if we lose, I my worry has always been under Trump, that Canada would be Austria in the 30s, the Anschluss. Uh, and that feels nearer and it feels scarier. But I'm not here to talk about my anxieties. We all know our anxieties. We've all been sitting in them for a while. My takeaway, the thing that I think we need to think about seriously, if we want to prevent Polyev from winning here, if we want to stop this tide of fascism, I think that this election record recently demonstrates that the politics of fear only works for the right. This tactic of it's the most important election of our lives, and if you don't vote for X, you are voting for fascism. And, you'll lose your rights and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even if that is true, as an incentive to get people to the polls, it's not working. And more than that, trying to poach votes from the right, God, is that not working? Like here in BC on election day, there was this like wild, freakish weather thing, the atmospheric river, it was called. There was torrential rain all over the place and massive flooding in a lot of parts of the province. And the conservative people went out in that to vote for climate change deniers. For a lot of those candidates, climate change denier is sort of like one of the least offensive things about them. There's also a lot of residential school deniers and January 6th supporters and yet people went out in the rain to vote for them. And people did not enough people went out to vote for anybody else. I did vote in the rain. It was a very empty polling place. And we had two options other than the Conservatives. We had the NDP, who in provincially are middle of the road, or we had the Greens, who were making a good case. And I was undecided. I was undecided even when I had the ballot in my hand. But I had the opportunity to speak to the NDP candidate, and I pushed her for, to make a case from the left, a case that wasn't that wasn't, fear. And my fear of the Conservatives winning, I did end up going for NDP. I would have been happy with either one. And if we didn't have first past the post, we could have had both of those excellent candidates in office. But we do. And so we are always stuck voting for the least worst option. And that is hard to get excited about. And for those of us who are, progressive and more progressive plus, I really don't like the term leftist because I just don't think it's specific, although in this case it kind of works as an umbrella term. For those of us who are not right, if we're having a hard time voting for the lesser of two evils, just so exhausted, just trying to get the enthusiasm up to do that. And then that lesser of two evils tries to campaign to win the votes of the people who have the opposite values from us. It just makes it that much harder. And I really like looking at the results of these elections that have happened, the group of them, and there's more. Can we admit can we admit that you can't beat fascism by moving to the right? It's not just the campaigns, the politicians who have been letting the right set the conversation. Um, Journalists have been so focused on presenting balance and not accuracy. And I know a lot of them it's because they're under pressure of time and money, but still, they're letting the right set the conversation. They're letting the fascists set the conversation, set the terms. That's not working. It's not working. And we need something other than fear. We need to be leading the conversation, and we need to be leading the conversation with something other than fear. When you look at the wins, the genuine wins on the broader progressive lefty sort of thing, it's usually when people were offering something and campaigning on hope. Like Obama campaigned on hope, but not just a vague hope. It was specifically about healthcare reform, which did his best to deliver, even though he, had a lot of other shortcomings. So many drones. And Trudeau campaigned on giving us election reform, and then he fucked us. He offered hope. And I mean, he offered a change from Harper, and now we're going to be going back to something even worse than Harper. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't know Canadian politics that I'm talking so much about it, but like, I feel we have lost, the broader we have lost our way culturally. We're always letting the right lead the conversation, and we're letting the neoliberals define what is possible. And the neoliberals will always give you the smallest possible, most individualistic things, because like like had Kamala Harris won, it would have been cool for America to have its first woman president. We had our first female prime minister uh, in the 90s. But it's like a total blip because she didn't do anything. Because just being something isn't really doing anything. Like, what would have been genuinely feminist as if she'd run on childcare and women's healthcare or something. Like, you have to offer people something, not individual excellence, but actually something for them. I said my hometown province has been conservative for a while now. Saskatchewan, oddly enough, is actually the birthplace of democratic socialism in Canada. Um, uh, the party that is now the NDP. It was founded by a guy called Tommy Douglas. And sure, he wasn't perfect. The mid-century, a lot of the usual pitfalls, but um, he was actually a preacher, and he spoke to the working class, to the farmers particularly, gave them something to get excited about and work for them. Talked about, skimming the fat off the top and giving it, like, he talked about it in terms of the way that you get cream. He talked about it on their terms to them and gave them something to believe in. And now, like, I just don't see people doing that. Like, think about you're a Roosevelt and the New Deal. Like, the courage of your convictions and offering something real to people is how you get them to the polls. And I'm not talking about reaching out to the people who voted for Trump. Ignore who people voted for and reach for their values by showing your value, right? Like by showing something real, because I think it's not the committed. There are people who are committed fascists. There are people who are committed moderates who will try and go for the middle of the road for everything. And do you really want to go after those people? But there's a lot of people who are uninformed and uninspired and uncommitted. And like giving them something to believe in and giving them something to believe in can get them to decide. Can get them to go and vote and to do something. And not just saying you owe us. And not saying if you don't, then the sky will fall. Because it sounds a bit the boy who cried fascists. Always talking about the fear. Well, they are here. I'm not saying that the fascists aren't real. They are fucking real. The wolf is at the door. The wolf is inside the house. In your house, dear neighbors, the wolf is inside the house. He's got his feet on the cushions. For us, the wolf is at the door. I don't know that just saying to people, "There's a wolf, there's a wolf, there's a wolf," doesn't seem to be working. I don't know what this is me rambling. I haven't written this out because I'm trying to make sense of it all. We need to start shaping the conversation. I think here on YouTube and the podcast spaces and all that, there's been a lot of work trying to understand the right, and that is useful. It's very useful work. But we also need to start, working on building things and talking about what's possible. Because these politics of fear only seems to serve the right. The politics of shame only seem to serve the right. Yeah. So it's just, if we want something better, then while we are afraid, I am terrified. I'm terrified for my friends, and I'm terrified for what will become of my country. But I don't want to take my politics from fear. I want to take my politics from love and from joy and from building something, from community, from solidarity. And to that end, I don't have the date and the details quite yet, but in December, I will be doing a live reading of Much Ado About Nothing with a bunch of my creator friends. And we're going to try and raise some funds for Trans Lifeline. I will have details in this coming month because we're going to be doing this in December. When I usually do my Christmas Carol this year, we've opted for some fun Shakespearean shenanigans. We're going to be a little bit gender chaotic about all this and try to create something. Create something joyful together and hopefully raise some awareness and some funds for a good cause that really needs us. And we should continue to be doing that for Gaza as well. There are 2 genocides we need to be worrying about. Actually, there are several, but keep an eye on Congo and all the other. Yeah, there's so much. There is so much to fear. But fear isn't working. So let's hold each other in love. And let's talk about how we build better. And let's if we have to get there first and then bring the politicians on board, we do have to get there first and then bring the politicians on board. We have to look at the people who have been doing the work of everyday community building. And, I really do understand why a lot of Arab folks couldn't vote for her. It would have been hard for me. I don't know how we make a change there. But yeah, we need to turn away from fear, and we need to send the message that fear is not how we win. Here are 2 quotes that have been in my head recently that I want to share. My friends, love is better than anger. Hope is better than fear. Optimism is better than despair. So let us be loving, hopeful, and optimistic, and we'll change the world. We are all in this world together, and the only test of our character that matters is how we look after the least fortunate among us. How we look after each other, not how we look after ourselves. That's all that really matters, I think. Let's turn towards each other, and let's seek joy. And for my queer folks out there, queer existence is resistance. Queer joy is resistance. And above all, to my trans friends and their siblings, your existence matters. Don't go anywhere. While I have your attention, if you, like me, are concerned about what's happening in Gaza, there are some links here to give what you can, whether it's time, attention, or money, to help the people who are suffering.